Tonight we step into the humid breath of the jungle, where dawn hums with cicadas and stone temples glow like old bones beneath a rising sun. You squint through the mist and hear a rhythmic thud, too deliberate to be thunder, too hollow to be a heartbeat. That, believe it or not, is the sound of entertainment, Mayan style. Not drums, not music. Just a solid ball of rubber smacking against limestone, the ancient equivalent of primetime television. Only difference? You probably wouldn't survive an episode. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a place the jungle hasn't yet claimed back, though it tries. Roots clutch the edges of tiered stone, lichen eats into glyphs that once glimmered with fresh paint. A sliver of sun slices through the trees, illuminating a flat rectangle flanked by steep walls. The air tastes of wet leaves and something faintly metallic, like ancient sweat. You've arrived at a ball court, one of the hundreds that dotted the Mayan world from the Yucatan to Honduras. It's early morning, and already the humidity feels like a wet blanket. The faint smell of resin and burnt copal incense hangs in the air. Someone's prepping for the day's match. You imagine you're here to watch, maybe even play, but as your sandals scrape over the packed earth, you sense that this is no simple sport. In the distance, a conch shell sounds, low and mournful. Players emerge from the temple shadows, moving like carved statues brought to life. You catch their wary eyes, their tight jaws. No one's smiling. No team chants, no cheerleaders, not even casual trash talk. Just silence, punctuated by the slap of rubber being tested against stone. It's all very serious. The ball, you soon learn, isn't some soft, bounce-happy toy. It's dense, heavy, nearly 10 pounds of raw rubber and tree sap. Drop it on your foot and you'll be limping for days. Some scholars say the Mayans invented rubber centuries before Europe even knew it existed. Others argue they stumbled into it while trying to make waterproof sandals. Either way, the stuff revolutionized everything from trade to ritual, though no one back then had the foresight to patent it. You edge closer, feeling the court radiate heat. Its surface is smooth but not forgiving. The walls curve slightly inward, creating what archaeologists call an acoustic funnel. If you speak too loudly, your voice ricochets strangely, bouncing around like the ball itself before dissolving into nothing. The Maya probably loved that, an arena where sound itself bowed to the gods. As you look around, you notice how much effort went into the layout. Every court aligns precisely with celestial patterns, east to west, north to south, like a cosmic compass carved from stone. Historians still argue whether this alignment was symbolic or practical. Some think the ball game mirrored the movement of the sun, a literal play between light and darkness. Others say the architects just liked straight lines and symmetry. Either way, you're standing on a sacred diagram disguised as a sports field. A priest appears near the edge, his robe painted with patterns of jaguars and skulls. He carries a smoking bowl of copal resin, its tendrils twisting toward the sky. The smell is sweet and sharp, something between pine and forgotten churches. He sprinkles cornmeal on the ground and mutters a blessing to Hunhunapu and Zbalank, the mythic hero twins. The crowd, small but reverent, bows slightly. You do too, because it feels like the sort of thing you should do. A noblewoman sitting under a parasol sips thick chocolate from a clay cup. Her attendants fan her lazily, unmoved by the heat. The drink glistens like melted bronze. It's spiced, bitter, a luxury reserved for the elite. You can't help but smirk. Imagine watching a sports match today while sipping artisanal chili cocoa out of a hand-carved mug. Same energy, really, different snacks. When the first player serves the ball, the sound cuts the morning in half. It ricochets off the sloped wall with a crack that makes you flinch. The man strikes it again, not with his hands, oh no, but with his hip. That's the trick here. No hands, no feet. Just hips, shoulders, and occasionally, the upper thigh if you're desperate. The players twist and contort in movements that look half dance, half accident. The ball spins, arcs, thuds. The game has started. You wait for the crowd to cheer, but they don't. They lean forward instead, murmuring softly. Every movement seems weighted with cosmic significance. Some whisper prayers. Others clutch amulets carved from jade or obsidian. You realize the point isn't entertainment, it's balance. The ball isn't just bouncing, it's reenacting creation itself, the eternal struggle between order and chaos. Still, you can't help but notice how quiet it all is. No scoreboard, no halftime show, no announcer booming over the mic. The drama here isn't in points or plays, it's in the uncertainty of what comes after. Historians still argue whether the losing team, or maybe the winning one, faced ritual death afterward. Murals suggest decapitation, while some carvings hint at symbolic sacrifice instead. It's possible the truth lies somewhere in between, a performance of death rather than actual execution. Then again, ancient civilizations were never known for half measures. A bead of sweat rolls down your neck as you watch the players move like living glyphs across the court. Their skin gleams with oil, their eyes locked on the bouncing sphere of fate. For a moment, the sun breaks fully through the canopy, setting the limestone aglow. The court becomes a mirror of the sky, a place where mortals pretend to be gods. And just as you start to understand that this isn't just a game, it's an offering, a whistle blows. The ball stops mid-bounce. Everyone freezes. The priest raises his arm toward the horizon. Somewhere beyond the trees, howler monkeys scream like the echo of a lost crowd. You take a deep breath, tasting time itself, thick, heavy, ancient. This was never about fun. It was about keeping the universe running. And as you stand there, heart drumming quietly in your chest, you realize the dull truth of the Mayan ballgame. It wasn't designed to entertain you. It was designed to test you, to see if you could watch life and death play out in real time and still keep your composure. The crowd exhales as the players return to their positions. The rhythm begins again. Thud, thud, thud. The jungle hums, the sky watches, and you, just another visitor across centuries, start to wonder whether the gods are keeping score, or simply watching to see who blinks first. You walk further down the sloped edge of the court, the stone beneath your feet warm from the morning sun, and it's here that you finally understand why the Maya called this place pits, a name that almost sounds like the sound the ball makes when it hits the wall. You crouch, press your palm to the surface, and feel how the limestone hums faintly. Every bounce, every footstep, every whispered prayer seems to vanish into it, swallowed whole. This isn't just clever architecture, it's intentional. The court was built to consume sound. It feels eerie at first, like standing in a giant ear that listens but never replies. When the ball strikes the wall again, the impact rolls through your bones, but it doesn't echo. Instead, the sound collapses on itself, absorbed by the smooth stone. You clap your hands experimentally. Nothing. Not even a faint return. The players, you realize, are moving in a kind of sacred vacuum, sealed off from the noise of the world. The Maya engineered this effect with terrifying precision. Their ball courts, long and narrow with high vertical sides, acted like acoustic traps. They could make voices vanish or carry in specific directions, depending on how the sound struck the angles. Archaeologists who tested the famous court at Chichen Itza discovered that even a whisper at one end can be heard perfectly at the other, but only if you stand at the right spot. Shift a little off-center, and it's silence. You imagine priests using that phenomenon to command the crowd without ever raising their voices, like gods throwing sound itself around for fun. You look up the steep walls where carved rings still hang high above. They are stone hoops, each barely big enough for the ball to pass through. At least, that's the theory. Historians still argue whether the players ever actually aimed for those rings or whether they were symbolic decorations added centuries later. Some point to murals that show the ball flying toward the hoop, while others shake their heads, muttering that hitting that target with hips alone would have been physically impossible. You tilt your head back, squinting at the ring's height. Yeah, impossible seems like a fair assessment. The players continue to move below you, focused, rhythmic. Sweat slicks their bodies, and every movement feels premeditated, almost ritualistic. They don't talk or signal, they just know. The ball arcs, hits the sloped wall, and rebounds toward another player who turns his entire body like a hinge, striking it back. The move looks both painful and practiced. You wince sympathetically, no protective gear except thick belts and padding. You'd last, 5 minutes out there? Maybe less if the ball caught you square in the ribs. And yet, as much as this feels like sport, there's no scorekeeping. No audience noise. Just the rhythm of flesh and stone. One thud after another, echoing in your chest like a heartbeat that isn't yours. You think about modern sports arenas, horns blaring, vendors shouting, phones flashing. Here, the noise is internal. You can hear your own breathing louder than the game itself. The silence makes it intimate, almost suffocating. Some say the Maya built the court this way to remind players that the gods were always listening, even when humans couldn't. The sound didn't disappear, it just moved upward. You glance at the temples that frame each end of the field. Priests once stood atop those platforms, watching from the heaven's edge. Their chants would slide down the walls and mingle with the sound of the game, a dialogue between the divine and the doomed. You imagine being one of those priests, standing still in the heat, face painted with lime and soot. Below, players hurl themselves at fate. Above, you hold the calendar in your mind, ticking toward the next eclipse. When the shadows shift and align perfectly across the court, you raise your hands, signaling the climax of the ritual. The ball freezes mid-bounce. The world seems to hold its breath. The Maya weren't just playing, they were reenacting cosmic balance, a drama that made physics and faith identical. But even knowing that, part of you can't shake the odd dullness of it. You expect spectacle, but the court remains restrained, almost sleepy. The drama exists in layers you can't fully see. You glance at the carvings near the base of the wall, serpents twisting, skulls smiling, mace sprouting from decapitated necks. That last one catches your eye. It's gruesome but poetic, life growing from death. The Maya had a knack for that kind of symbolism, comforting and horrifying in equal measure. Nearby, a young attendant scatters flower petals over the boundary lines. The scent mingles with the earthy musk of the court. He moves silently, never interrupting the flow. His bare feet leave faint prints on the dusty limestone before the heat dries them away. You wonder if he'll ever play, or if he's just waiting for a turn that will never come. In a world like this, roles are fixed. Priests pray, nobles watch, players suffer. Everyone else? They observe and interpret. As the sun climbs higher, the shadows of the wall shift, stretching long fingers across the court. The players follow those shadows, timing their movements with precision. Some scholars think the Mayan calendar itself, so famously intricate, might have tied to the game's rhythms. Each match could mark celestial cycles, with every serve a metaphor for the sun's journey. Others argue that's giving too much credit to human imagination, but you prefer the poetic version. After all, what's history without a little cosmic flair? You sit against the wall, tracing a glyph carved centuries ago. It depicts a ball court shaped exactly like this one, surrounded by symbols for the 4 cardinal directions. In the center, A ball, half light, half dark. The eternal contest. It's strangely humbling to think the Maya saw play not as distraction, but as divine maintenance. Keep the ball moving, and the world stays balanced. Drop it, and who knows? Maybe the stars fall out of alignment. The crowd shifts quietly, murmuring in a language long lost. You catch fragments. It's kin, sikij, words that sound like water and stone colliding. The game continues, steady as a heartbeat. You start to lose track of time. Maybe that's the point. The court consumes sound, and maybe it eats time too. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the vibration of the ball through the floor, the weight of the air pressing on your skin. You try to imagine the countless games played here. Kings, captives, priests, farmers, all sweating under the same merciless sun. Generations of breath and heartbeat soaked into the stone until the court itself became alive, pulsing faintly even now. A sudden gust of wind swirls dust around you, carrying the faint scent of burning copal from a nearby altar. You open your eyes to find the match still going, unchanged. The players move like clockwork, the crowd like ghosts. For a second, you wonder if you've stepped out of your own time and into theirs, caught in a cycle that never stopped. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbles. Or maybe it's just the sound of another ball, striking another wall, in another forgotten court. Either way, the jungle listens, and then swallows the sound whole. You wander from the court's edge toward the workshops, following the faint, sticky scent that rides the breeze. The noise fades behind you, thuds and murmurs replaced by the gentle squish of something being kneaded. You step into a shaded clearing where several Maya artisans squat around clay bowls, each filled with a thick black liquid that looks suspiciously like tar. They are not making pottery. They are making the soul of the game, the ball itself. At first glance, it seems simple. Pour sap, stir, shape. But when you lean closer, you see the complexity. The workers slice vines of morning glory into ribbons, their milky sap oozing into the mix. It sizzles faintly when it touches the rubber tree latex, creating a smell somewhere between burnt sugar and wet leaves. You wrinkle your nose. It's not exactly pleasant. Yet this odd jungle chemistry is what gives the ball its bounce. Without the morning glory additive, the latex would stay a sticky, sagging mess. With it, it hardens, gains elasticity, a discovery so accidental and so clever it makes you smile. You picture some long-forgotten Maya tinkerer standing under a rubber tree during a storm, watching sap drip into puddles, then noticing that when it mixed with morning glory residue, it didn't just dry, it rebounded. The first true rubber ball in human history. While Europe was still clanking around in armor, these folks were inventing playground physics. You run your fingers along a half-finished sphere. It's surprisingly warm, the texture like cured leather but denser. You could probably knock a small jaguar unconscious with it. Not that you should try. Historians still argue whether the Maya were the first to use this chemical combo, or if the Olmecs, their much older neighbors, beat them to it. The evidence leans toward the Olmecs, who were bouncing rubber balls as far back as 1600 BC, long before the Maya carved their first glyph. But the Maya perfected the art. They didn't just play with rubber, they ritualized it. They turned a backyard invention into cosmology. You watch as the artisans finish shaping the ball. One man dips it in a thin resin glaze that gives it a deep, obsidian sheen. When he rolls it across the stone floor, it bounces cleanly, landing with a satisfying thump. You flinch, instinctively protective of your shins. He grins, clearly proud, then mutters a short blessing before handing it off to a runner, who disappears toward the court. You realize that this process, the mixing, heating, kneading, isn't just production, it's ceremony. The materials themselves are sacred. Rubber trees were believed to contain the essence of the underworld, while morning glory vines were thought to connect to the heavens. Mix them together, and you're literally blending worlds, heaven and hell, light and darkness, all rolled into one perfect, deadly sphere. A priest nearby watches the work, occasionally sprinkling a pinch of maize flour into the mixture. You ask, well, think to ask, why? He might tell you that maize feeds the world, and so even the ball, symbol of the cosmos, must eat before it moves. It's strangely poetic, and a bit like seasoning fate before it's served. Your gaze drifts to a pile of discarded materials, misshapen balls that cracked, ones that were too soft, or too heavy. They lie there like forgotten planets, destined never to spin. The Maya probably recycled them, melting them down again, mixing more sap, more vine, more time. They had no factories, no molds, just hands and patience. Rubber was life, currency, offering, weapon. Nearby, two children kick around a smaller ball, laughing. Their version looks lighter, maybe filled with dried grass or air pockets. You can't help but grin at the scene, the universal joy of tossing, catching, testing gravity's limits. Even now, in our concrete world of gyms and smartphones, that instinct survives. Give a human a ball, and we'll find meaning in motion. But here, meaning is heavier. The same material used to make the game's ball also coated idols, sealed jars, even served in medicine. Some Maya chewed raw latex to clean their teeth, though one look at their expressions tells you it wasn't exactly minty fresh. There's even a fringe theory that priests wore thin layers of rubber on their skin during certain rituals to absorb divine energy. Whether that's true or just an archaeologist's fever dream, no one can say. You lean against a tree, feeling its bark rough beneath your palm. The rubber trees tower above, dripping slow tears of sap into clay bowls. It's strange to think these quiet giants fueled an entire belief system. Each cut in their bark bleeds the potential for both play and death. You trace a scar where the sap has dried, black and shiny like obsidian. The jungle buzzes softly. Beetles, birds, a distant monkey scream. Life, humming beneath ritual. The workers finish their day's batch and hang the leftover vines to dry. One of them smears his face with a thin layer of the sticky sap, part sunscreen, part insect repellent, part superstition. You remember the old line about crocodile dung sunscreen from Egypt and laugh quietly. Humans really will smear anything on themselves if they think it helps. The man glances at you curiously, then shrugs, unbothered. To him, this is normal. You follow a narrow path back toward the court, stepping over roots that twist like petrified snakes. In the distance, you hear that rhythmic thud again. The new ball must be in play already. The jungle seems to move with it, branches swaying in time, birds quieting as though listening. You think about the fragility of the material. Rubber eventually dries, cracks, loses its bounce. Every ball they made had a lifespan, just like its players. And maybe that's why the Maya loved it so much. It was impermanent. A perfect metaphor for human life, full of energy, briefly resilient, and then gone. One artisan wipes his hands and holds up a finished ball to the light. For a moment, the sunlight hits it perfectly, and it gleams, black but alive, reflecting the trees, the sky, and your face all at once. It looks like it's holding the whole world inside it. He smiles faintly, tosses it once, and says something that sounds like, "The gods are ready to play." You watch the ball spin in midair, glistening with resin and sweat, and realize that this quiet act of creation, is what keeps the myth alive. Before there were kings or captives, before temples or tournaments, there was this. Human hands, raw materials, and the stubborn belief that we could make meaning bounce. As you turn back toward the court, the noise grows again, drums this time, and chanting. The game is beginning in you, and somewhere among those thuds and calls, That ball you just saw will soon carry prayers, power, and perhaps a touch of regret. The air thickens with heat and incense, and you wonder, who first thought to make something so simple, and then burden it with the weight of the universe? You're back at the court now, standing close enough to see the tension in the player's shoulders. The smell of dust and sweat hits you first, a reminder that for all its cosmic symbolism, this is still a very physical game. The players shift restlessly, tugging at their gear. You notice how each man's body looks sculpted by survival rather than vanity. Thick muscles, scarred skin, and eyes that stay fixed somewhere between the wall and the horizon. You start to understand, this isn't uniformed glory. It's armor. Their outfits are a strange mix of practicality and ceremony. Thick belts of leather wrap around their waists, padded to absorb the ball's brutal impact. Some have wooden plates strapped to their hips or thighs, polished smooth from use. Others wear collars made of bark or cloth, meant to protect the ribs and neck but doing little for comfort. You can almost hear the creak of leather as they move. It's less sportswear and more don't die today fashion. One player ties a strip of cloth around his forehead. It's red, frayed at the edges, darkened with years of sweat. A talisman, maybe. He mutters something under his breath before stepping forward to test the weight of the ball. It hits his hip and rebounds neatly. He doesn't flinch. You try not to imagine what that would feel like if it missed the padding and caught bone. Probably a sound like breaking pottery. Nearby, attendants adjust the player's arm bands, woven cords with jade beads or shells that rattle softly. The sound, faint but deliberate, carries through the quiet like a heartbeat. Some scholars think these accessories symbolized status, but others suspect they were just charms for luck. Either way, you notice no one's underdressed. In a game that might end in sacrifice, every bead, every carving, every smudge of pigment probably meant something. Historians still argue whether these players were volunteers, professionals, or captives forced to perform. There's evidence for all three. In some cities, the ballgame was an honor, a way to display strength before nobles. In others, it was punishment, a slow-motion spectacle for those destined to die. The murals don't always help. One shows a victorious player being showered with gifts, another shows a similar scene ending in decapitation. You'd think they'd label their art more clearly. The priest from before steps forward again, holding a small bowl of thick, ochre paint. He dips his thumb and smears a streak across each player's chest. The mark gleams in the sunlight, blood-colored, symbolic. Maybe it's meant to protect, maybe to dedicate. You notice he does it without meeting their eyes, as if to remind everyone that his role is divine, not personal. You glance up toward the crowd. The nobles sit in shaded seats, dressed in embroidered cotton, feathers, and jade jewelry that catch the light like tiny stars. The peasants, standing in the open, squint through the heat, faces glistening. Everyone's watching, but no one cheers. It's reverence, not fandom. You get the sense that noise would break the spell, and that would be dangerous. The players form two lines, facing each other. Their bodies gleam with oil, and their belts make them look almost insect-like, jointed, armored, efficient. The referee, if that's what he is, raises a hand-carved stick. It's the closest thing you'll see to a whistle. The ball is tossed, and the match begins. The first strike resounds like a drumbeat. The ball arcs and smacks the wall, spinning back into the air. A player dives, twisting his hip into its path. It rebounds with force enough to make you flinch. The ball whips toward another man, who deflects it with his upper thigh, sending it skimming low across the court. For a moment, it's beautiful, grace in motion, like a flock of birds turning mid-flight. Then it hits someone square in the ribs. The sound is unpleasant. You feel it deep in your own chest. No one reacts. The player grunts, staggers, then straightens again. There's pride in the pain. You can see it in the set of his jaw. In a world where playing means aligning with gods, bruises are offerings, not injuries. You wonder how often these matches ended in disaster. Broken bones, internal bleeding, worse. The Maya left few records of such mundane details. They preferred to depict idealized victories, not the grim mechanics of what kept those victories possible. Yet the bones found near old courts tell a quieter truth. Healed fractures, shattered hips, dislocated spines. It wasn't just mythic heroism, it was occupational hazard. The ball ricochets wildly, clipping a player's shoulder and bouncing off the sloped wall. Another man intercepts it mid-roll, swinging his torso to send it back. It's a strange rhythm, half fight, half dance. You can almost feel the energy pulling everyone tighter, breath syncing with the tempo. Thud, thud, pause, thud. And despite the sweat, the heat, the risk, you can't help but notice the beauty. Their movements, so calculated and severe, have the elegance of ritual. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. Every twist and rebound maps perfectly onto something greater. The cosmos, perhaps, or just centuries of tradition drilled into muscle memory. One player's belt snaps during a turn, leather dangling like a broken wing. He doesn't stop. He keeps going, ignoring the disadvantage. Maybe he knows that stopping isn't an option. If the gods are watching, you can't take a timeout. The priest raises his hands again, chanting in a low monotone that blends with the sound of the game. You don't understand the words, but you catch the rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. It mirrors the ball. Coincidence? Probably not. A light breeze cuts through the court, lifting the smell of sweat and resin into the air. The nobles watch, unmoving. A child somewhere laughs quietly, quickly hushed by his mother. For a moment, the world feels suspended. You're aware of everything, the sting of sun on your skin, the dull ache in your feet, the strange serenity of the player's focus. And then it hits you. These uniforms are more than protection. They are identity. Each layer of padding, each symbolic color, each ritual mark transforms the players into something else. Half man, half myth. Without the belts, the jade charms, the red paint, they'd just be men sweating in a courtyard. But dressed like this, they become conduits. Moving prayers. You glance back toward the jungle, where the trees sway lazily, indifferent. Out there, life continues. Birds, monkeys, insects humming the eternal background tune of existence. In here, though, in this rectangular echo chamber, humanity is trying to impress the sky. One of the players stumbles, catching the ball wrong. It shoots upward, bouncing off the wall and landing out of reach. The whistle stick cracks against the stone. The game stops. Everyone freezes, breath held. For a long second, the only sound is the soft hiss of wind over stone. The priest's voice breaks the silence, measured, calm. You don't know the words, but the tone says enough. Correction, not condemnation. The players bow their heads briefly, then reset. The rhythm begins anew. You realize this repetition, this order, is part of the game's spell. Not victory, not points, continuity. As long as the ball moves, so does the world. And the moment it stops, everything trembles. The match continues, sweat turning to steam in the thick air. Somewhere in the stands, a noblewoman fans herself, uninterested. You smirk. She's clearly seen better games. But for the players below, this is everything. Every bruise, every bead of sweat, every carefully tied belt. Proof that they are still part of the grand design. The next serve strikes the wall perfectly, echoing deep in your chest. You feel the court vibrate again, devouring sound, storing it somewhere secret. Maybe, you think, every hit adds one more heartbeat to the earth itself. And if that's true, the Maya kept their world alive one bruise at a time. You sit down on a low stone near the edge of the court, trying to make sense of what you've been watching. The players move with the precision of clockwork, yet no one seems to be counting anything. No referees with clipboards, no chalk marks on the walls, no cheering for a point. You squint at the carved ring high above the centerline and wonder, how exactly did anyone win this thing? That's when it hits you. Nobody really knows. The rules of the Mayan ballgame, for all its grandeur, were never written down. Not a single surviving codex lays out instructions. Historians have spent decades piecing together theories from murals, carvings, and scattered fragments of oral tradition. Some claim the goal was to keep the ball constantly moving, never letting it touch the ground, a kind of celestial juggling act. Others insist there were points, scored when the ball bounced off certain markers or hit the wall at just the right angle. And then there are the romantic theorists who say the entire game was metaphor, not competition. The ball didn't symbolize victory, it symbolized continuity. Still, the ring looms high, tauntingly small. You crane your neck and imagine trying to hit that target using only your hip. One solid attempt, maybe, and you'd be nursing a dislocated spine. The archaeologists who reconstructed some courts tested it, of course. Modern athletes with modern bravado, and most couldn't come close. Even a single clean shot would have been an act of both precision and lunacy. Which, come to think of it, might be exactly what the gods enjoyed watching. The players keep moving, but their faces betray little. Focus, strain, exhaustion, all blurred into the same expression. It's easy to forget that this game wasn't about fun, it was about survival. The energy feels less like competition and more like performance. The crowd, still subdued, watches intently, not for who wins, but for what the outcome means. Historians still argue whether the ball game was a sport, a ritual, or both. Maybe, as with so many ancient things, the line between them didn't exist. For the Maya, religion wasn't something you attended, it was something you did, sweated, and occasionally bled for. Every serve, every rebound carried the weight of myth. You could say it was the original form of performance art, just with higher stakes and fewer critics. You look closer at one player, a tall man with a jaguar tattoo across his chest. The design shimmers with sweat, the ink glistening under the sun. Each movement he makes seems choreographed with intent. When he strikes the ball, it's not random, it's ritual precision. You realize that maybe he doesn't care about points either. Maybe he's just trying to maintain rhythm, because in this world, rhythm equals order, and order equals cosmic stability. A priest calls something from the sideline. The tone is sharp, corrective. The game pauses, then resumes with slight adjustments, spacing, formation, timing. The players obey without question. It's strange. The structure feels both rigid and improvised, like jazz played for the gods. You can almost hear the invisible tempo, the unspoken cues. You remember reading that the Maya word for to play ball, pits, also had connotations tied to sacrifice and destiny. That one verb could mean to play, to wager, or to risk. It's all the same in the cosmic economy. Play, and you gamble your fate. No refunds. One man misjudges a bounce. The ball clips his hip and rockets out of bounds. A collective murmur ripples through the crowd. Not disappointment, but apprehension. The priest steps forward again, gestures toward the player, then toward the ball. The ritual pauses for a moment. Someone retrieves the ball, dusts it off, sprinkles cornmeal over it, and mutters a short prayer before returning it. The match resumes. You think of modern referees tossing a football after wiping grass off it. Only here, the gesture feeds the gods. There's a theory that each game mirrored the cycles of the heavens, day and night, life and death, order and chaos. When the ball touched the earth, it was symbolic of the sun descending into the underworld. When it rose again, the sun was reborn. If that's true, then every bounce was a miniature apocalypse, and every return, a resurrection. You glance around the court, at the carvings of serpents and suns, and you can almost believe it. A cool breeze slips through the stands, carrying the faint scent of cacao and roasting maize. You watch nobles sip from painted cups, utterly unbothered by the existential ballet unfolding below. One yawns delicately. Maybe they've seen this drama too many times. Maybe for them, the thrill isn't in the outcome, it's in the symbolism. Watching the god's story play out again and again, knowing the ending never changes but the players always do. One of the players drops to a knee, chest heaving. The ball rolls to a stop between him and his opponent. For a moment, both men lock eyes. The crowd stills. The priest raises his arm. Time seems to stretch thin, like sap dripping from a cut tree. And then, impact. The ball launches upward, hitting the wall, spinning high before plummeting back down. The two collide mid-air, trying to strike it simultaneously. It rebounds once, twice, vanishes into sunlight. When it lands again, the sound echoes like thunder. Everyone exhales. You feel it, too, a tension released. It's ridiculous, maybe, but you can't help rooting for them even though you don't understand the score, or if there even is one. Humans love a contest, even when the rules are unknowable. You start to wonder what happens when the game ends. Not the mythical kind of ending, just the day-to-day wrap-up. Do they shake hands? Bow? Collapse from exhaustion? Do the priests immediately swoop in to interpret omens? There's evidence that the outcome, how the ball moved, where it stopped, determined divine messages or even political decisions. Imagine your local sports match doubling as foreign policy. Lose the game, lose a war alliance. No pressure. A lizard scurries across the stone near your foot, its tiny claws clicking softly. The jungle hums, indifferent as ever. You lean back on your hands, staring up at the ring again. It gleams faintly in the afternoon light. You try to picture a ball soaring through it, a perfect shot, a miracle of timing and muscle. The thought makes you grin. If anyone ever managed that, surely the gods would have demanded an encore. Still, the more you watch, the more the dull truth surfaces. This wasn't designed for thrill. The excitement was a side effect. The real goal lay in repetition, in proving the world still worked as it should. You realize that for the Maya, boredom might have been the ultimate victory. If the game was predictable, the gods were satisfied. Chaos averted. You exhale slowly, the air thick and warm. Another round begins, and the priest's voice rises again, steady, resonant, commanding. You don't need to understand the words to grasp their meaning. Keep playing. Keep moving. Keep the universe balanced. And you sit there, caught between fascination and fatigue, wondering if the players ever grew tired of it. If any of them ever wanted to rebel, just let the ball drop and see what would happen. You imagine one of them breaking the silence, saying, "What if we just stop?" You smile at the absurdity. In this world, stopping isn't an option. The gods have no patience for existential experiments. The ball hits the wall again. Thud. The sound reverberates through the stone, the sky, your chest. The rules may be forgotten, the meanings debated, but that noise endures. It's the heartbeat of a civilization that played not to win, but to endure. The sun tilts lower, pouring gold across the ball court's rim, and you finally take your place among the crowd. The stone benches are surprisingly comfortable, if by comfortable, you mean slightly less sharp than punishment. Around you, the atmosphere hums with a steady murmur of voices, shuffling feet, and the faint, sweet aroma of cocoa. Not the powdered kind from a supermarket tin. This is thick, spiced, and frothed to foam, sipped from carved gourds and painted cups. The nobles cradle theirs like fragile relics, while servants hover with bowls of beans and jade spoons. You take it all in, the swish of feathers, the scent of sweat and incense, the low buzz of conversation in a language that hums like bees. A noblewoman near you whispers to her companion, her words almost melodic, as she watches the players below. Her tone isn't one of excitement, it's closer to reverence, as if she's commenting on a sacred dance. Around her, others exchange cocoa beans, small trinkets, and folded bits of bark paper. Bets, you realize. Gambling wasn't just tolerated, it was practically liturgical. The ball bounces again, and the crowd collectively inhales. For a moment, you think you're at a sporting event. But the longer you observe, the clearer it becomes. This isn't entertainment. It's divination in motion. Every bounce, every ricochet, every echo against the wall might be an omen. Somewhere near the priests, a scribe marks something on a folded codex, eyes narrowed. You can almost hear his thoughts. If the ball strikes left twice, the gods favor the rain. If it rebounds thrice, war is imminent. Imagine trying to decode fate while someone else is literally playing keep up. You sip from a cup a young vendor offers, thick, bitter chocolate, spiced with chili. The taste jolts you awake, both strange and familiar. Cocoa, you remember, wasn't just a drink. It was currency. The Maya traded beans the way you might swap coins. So yes, technically, the crowd is drinking money while watching others risk their lives. It's the ancient equivalent of sipping your paycheck at the Super Bowl. Somewhere behind you, a group of boys imitates the players, bouncing a small rubber ball off their hips. They cheer each other with mock-serious voices, but even in play, they mimic the ritual gestures, the little bows, the hand over the heart before each serve. You realize the depth of it. For them, this game isn't pastime, it's inheritance. Historians still argue whether these public games were primarily religious ceremonies or political theater. The lines blur the more you think about it. To the kings and nobles watching, each motion on that court affirmed their power. The gods, after all, had chosen them to maintain order on earth, and this ritual, this so-called sport, was proof of divine endorsement. The game wasn't simply watched, it was witnessed, the way you'd attend a coronation or a sacrifice. At one end of the court, the priests cluster near a stone altar, their headdresses swaying as they chant. The sound drifts across the space, low and rhythmic. It doesn't compete with the game, it scores it, like a movie soundtrack that never resolves. The combination of sound, movement, and color lulls you into a half-trance. You can see why travelers and archaeologists describe the ball game as hypnotic, even dull in its monotony, yet irresistible to watch. The nobles clap once, just once, after a particularly smooth rebound. The sound echoes, brief and solemn. Nobody cheers, nobody waves. Applause here is almost sacred punctuation, not noise. You look over at a merchant balancing a basket of roasted maize. Even he bows slightly when the ball grazes the ring. And then there's the cocoa again, everywhere, always refilled. The drink, the ritual, the fuel of their conversations. You overhear snippets of gossip. Who offended which god, which city lost its crops, which dynasty fell from favor. The ball game, it seems, is both ceremony and social networking event. You can practically imagine a noble leaning over to whisper, "So, what's your harvest yield this year?" while pretending to interpret the movement of the ball. You notice that even the commoners seem invested, not in victory, but in meaning. When the ball lands at a particular angle, a hush spreads, and people glance toward the priests, waiting for confirmation. When no signal comes, conversation resumes, gentle and unhurried. The Maya, it seems, had patience for uncertainty. You could call that admirable, Or you could call it the ancient world's version of watching paint dry while hoping it spells your destiny. A servant refills your cup, her hands steady. You nod in thanks and catch her whispering a prayer before setting down the jug. Even she, barely old enough to serve, believes that the way the ball moves affects her future. It's strangely touching, this collective surrender to symbolism. Everyone here, from king to child, is bound to the rhythm of rubber and stone. You think about how, in modern life, people still gather for rituals that blur meaning and amusement. The opening of the Olympics, the lighting of a Christmas tree, even a midnight movie premiere. Maybe we're not so different from the Maya. We just replaced sacred rubber with sportswear logos. A priest raises his staff, and silence falls. The ball rolls to a stop near a carved skull marker. He studies it, mutters something to his attendants, and sprinkles cornmeal over the spot. The crowd leans forward. You do too, though you don't understand why. The gesture is small, almost theatrical, yet everyone seems to hold their breath. The priest finally nods. The game resumes, and the release of tension ripples through the stands like wind through leaves. It's absurdly beautiful, this shared exhale, proof that the entire community breathes in time with the ritual. You smile, realizing that for all their seriousness, the Maya were masters of pacing. Every pause, every silence was designed to sustain suspense. The world's first slow burn. And the cocoa keeps flowing. You're starting to feel a little jittery from it, or maybe that's just the heat. Either way, your mind drifts, imagining how many beans were spent today, how much caffeine fueled these sacred spectators. One ancient writer even claimed that too much cocoa made people drunk on visions. You chuckle softly. Leave it to humanity to find a way to hallucinate during a sports match. A light breeze cools your neck. The chants soften, the crowd murmurs again. Someone nearby begins humming an old tune, its melody looping like the ball's endless rebound. It dawns on you that, for the Maya, this wasn't dullness, it was meditation. Watching the ball game was an act of devotion, a reminder that the cosmos moves in circles, not lines. The ball slams against the wall, and a puff of dust drifts into sunlight. The crowd sighs. You catch yourself sighing, too, a small, sleepy mimicry of the collective. Maybe that's the secret. Maybe boredom was the point, forcing every mind into quiet, synchronized stillness, until the entire city shared the same breath, the same heartbeat. You glance at the priest again. He's still watching, impassive, but you swear there's a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. The ritual is working. The people are entranced. The gods, hopefully, are paying attention. And as the sun slides behind the jungle canopy, the cocoa tastes sweeter, the chants grow softer, and the rubber's steady rhythm becomes almost hypnotic. You blink slowly, eyes heavy, the hum of the crowd fading into something ancient, familiar. Somewhere deep inside, a thought murmurs like a lullaby. This is how civilizations dream. The sound of the crowd fades into the steady hum of twilight insects, and for a moment, the ball court seems to dissolve. The limestone walls blur, replaced by trees whose roots twist like serpents, and the air thickens with the scent of damp earth. You blink, and suddenly, you're not in the mortal world anymore. The jungle hushes. A pair of faint laughter echoes through the dark, mischievous and bright. The hero twins have arrived. You recognize them instantly, though they are not carved from stone or drawn in codices. They are alive, vibrant, and grinning like they've just broken every celestial rule imaginable. Hunahpu and Zbalanque, the trickster brothers of Maya myth, the original champions of the ball game. Their story is half legend, half cosmic manual, and somehow all prank. They're the kind of mythic heroes you'd want to hang out with, if you didn't mind your reality unraveling in the process. You follow as they step into a clearing. There's a ball court here too. The though this one glows faintly under an unseen sun. The air feels heavier, as if each breath carries centuries of belief. The twins toss the rubber ball between them, laughing, making it look easy. But you know this isn't just a game, it's preparation. They are about to face the gods of Xibalba, the Maya underworld. According to the Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Quiche Maya, the twins' father and uncle once played this same game, and lost badly. The lords of the underworld, annoyed by the noise of bouncing rubber, summoned the brothers to their domain and promptly executed them. The twins, born later, grew up hearing that story. And because they were either brave or foolish, or both, they decided to challenge Xibalba themselves. You can't help but admire the audacity. Two teenagers challenging death itself to a rematch, armed with nothing but a rubber ball and an infinite supply of sarcasm. It's basically the cosmic equivalent of yelling rematch after your ancestors lost a game of dodgeball to Satan. The scene shifts. The twins descend into the underworld, crossing rivers of blood and pus. You quietly skip imagining that in detail. Bedtime stories have limits. Each stage of the descent tests them: darkness, deception, fear. The lords of Xibalba greet them not with weapons, but with riddles and tricks, fake thrones, counterfeit gods, a greeting that burns the skin if returned incorrectly. You realize that this underworld isn't about torture, it's about humiliation. The gods of death are bureaucrats with a flair for theater. The twins play along, bowing politely, pretending to fall for every ruse, until the moment comes. The challenge is set, a ball game, winner takes, well, existence. They step onto the underworld court, and you notice it mirrors the real one above. Same narrow shape, same stone walls, same eerie silence. But this one feels alive. The walls pulse faintly, as if the court itself is breathing. The lords of Xibalba take their positions, skeletal, magnificent, and probably very confident. The game begins. Rubber strikes stone with a deep, resonant thunk, and the air vibrates. The twins move in unison, darting, leaping, spinning. They play not just to win, but to outwit. When the lords cheat, the twins cheat better. When a trap opens under their feet, they leap aside. When one of the gods hurls a razor-sharp ball meant to slice them in two, the brothers switch it with a harmless goad mid-play. You laugh out loud. It's absurd, clever, and completely theatrical. But this isn't all jest. Beneath the jokes, there's meaning. The game symbolizes the eternal battle between life and death, darkness and light. Every rebound is a sunrise, every fall a sunset. When one brother tumbles and rises again, it's not just a move, it's resurrection in miniature. Historians still argue whether the hero twins myth was a retelling of real ball games or if real ball games were imitations of the myth. Either way, the loop continues. The story plays out in ritual, and the ritual sustains the story. The dull repetition the priests demanded wasn't dull at all, it was cosmic rehearsal. You watch as the match grows more intense. The gods cheat shamelessly, poisoned balls, pits of spikes, even a quick swarm of bats, because of course the underworld has a bat room. Yet the twins adapt. When one is decapitated by the bat god Kamazots, the other replaces his brother's head with a gourd until he can retrieve the real one. You wince, then chuckle. It's grotesque slapstick, a myth written by someone who clearly believed the universe runs on persistence and irony. Eventually, the twins realize brute skill won't save them. So they switch strategies. They lose on purpose. Or at least, they pretend to. The gods celebrate too early, as villains always do, and the brothers turn their defeat into transformation. They leap into a fire, die spectacularly, then resurrect as radiant, godlike beings, masters of both death and rebirth. When they return to the court, they crush the lords of Xibalba once and for all. The crowd in your imagination, if there were one, would be silent. Not in boredom, but in awe. The game, it turns out, was never about points or prestige. It was the universe playing itself, endlessly looping through life, death, and renewal. You think about the players you watched earlier, sweating under the sun, following every ritual motion with mechanical grace. They weren't just imitating gods, they were continuing them. Every match, no matter how tedious, kept the myth alive. Maybe that's the point of the dull truth. You repeat until meaning emerges. You glance at the hero twins one last time. They are laughing again, the way brothers do when they've pulled off something incredible. The underworld dissolves around them, replaced by dawn breaking over jungle leaves. You realize the ballgame above and below are one and the same. The cosmic court and the human one echo each other endlessly. The air lightens, the world solidifies. You're back in the mortal realm, seated on stone, cocoa cup cooling in your hand. The players move again, their rhythm steady, their faces unreadable. Somewhere, a priest mutters a line from the Popol Vuh under his breath. The twins' victory wasn't just legend, it was instruction. Keep playing, keep the sun alive. You sigh softly, realizing that the entire civilization depended on this weary, repetitive miracle. It's both absurd and beautiful, the thought that bouncing a rubber ball could keep existence from collapsing. But maybe, deep down, every culture believes in something like that, a ritual so ordinary it holds the universe together. A parrot screeches from a nearby tree, breaking your reverie. The game continues below. You smile faintly. The gods may have won or lost, but the Maya? They kept playing anyway. The jungle thickens again as the air cools, the crowd fading into murmurs. You feel that lingering echo of the hero twins' laughter, like distant thunder, and yet the mortal game presses on, slower now, heavier. The players' bodies glisten in the fading light. You can see every muscle tremble as they shift their weight, the smell of sweat and clay fusing into something ancient, something that belongs to the earth more than to flesh. You watch one man collapse onto his knees, breath rasping, his skin streaked with dust. A priest signals for water, not to refresh him, but to sprinkle the ground. The ball lies between them, coated in grime, its rubber sheen dulled by hours of ritual motion. For all its cosmic symbolism, this game looks less like glory and more like exhaustion. And yet, the gods demand it. The priests step closer to the court's edge. They chant in low tones, syllables long and liquid, carrying across the stone like smoke. The words are old, their meanings half lost to time, but their purpose remains clear: appeasement. You can almost feel it in your bones. This isn't a prayer of joy, it's an obligation, a weary contract renewed with every echoing thud of the ball. You remember reading that the Maya sometimes referred to their gods as hungry. They didn't just desire attention, they needed it. Rituals like this fed them. The dull repetition, the discipline, the sheer persistence, it all served to remind the cosmos that humans hadn't forgotten their part of the bargain. You wonder if that's why the players never smile. Historians still argue whether the ball game truly ended in sacrifice. The murals show scenes of beheadings, but some scholars believe those are metaphors, symbolic offerings to the gods of death and rebirth. Others are less optimistic, pointing to altars stained by time and, possibly, by blood. You shift uneasily. Maybe both are true. The Maya rarely separated the symbolic from the literal. To them, belief and action were the same breath. The game slows. One player falters, another catches the ball with a sharp hip strike, sending it spinning back into play. The rhythm picks up again. You notice that the priest's chants rise with the pace, as though the court itself is conducting them. It's hypnotic. You can't tell whether the humans are serving the gods, or the gods are serving the rhythm. And yet, somewhere under all that divine gravity, you catch a flicker of absurdity. One of the players wipes his brow, clearly done with this cosmic burden, only for the ball to rebound squarely into his ribs. He groans, mutters something that sounds suspiciously like an ancient equivalent of "really?" You chuckle under your breath. Even in sacred ritual, life insists on slapstick. The priests notice your grin, or maybe they notice the moment of levity in the players themselves. One of them frowns, lifts a bowl of burning copal resin, and waves it toward the court. Smoke curls upward, dense and aromatic. The players bow their heads. The gods, apparently, prefer their worship solemn. You try to imagine what it must have felt like to play this game knowing the gods were watching, not metaphorically, but literally, their eyes hidden behind clouds and carved idols. The pressure must have been immense. Miss a shot, and maybe drought follows. Score too soon, and perhaps your victory offends the celestial hierarchy. It's the worst kind of spectator sport, divine micromanagement. You rub your temple, feeling the same creeping fatigue the players must feel. The game drags on, not because of boredom, but because of gravity, both physical and spiritual. The dull truth reveals itself in slow motion. This was never about fun, or even triumph. It was about proving obedience through repetition. You catch yourself whispering a silent count of the rebounds, as if tracking them might unlock meaning. 6, 7, 8, then a pause. A player stumbles again, clutching his side. The ball rolls free. The priest nearest him raises a blade of obsidian, not in anger, but as a signal. The player steadies himself, nods, and continues. You exhale. Maybe it's just ceremony. Or maybe that nod was a reminder. Pain is part of the offering. A bat flits across the court, quick and soundless, and you think again of the hero twins and their underworld trials. The myth lingers everywhere, in the sweat, in the ritual smoke, even in the silence between rebounds. You start to suspect the gods are a little bored themselves. Maybe this is what divine endurance looks like. Eternity spent watching mortals play the same game over and over. The priests finish another chant, and one raises his hands toward the horizon. The sun hovers low, orange and massive, just kissing the tops of the jungle trees. The moment feels deliberate. The ball strikes the wall, once, twice, then stops dead center. A perfect ending. The priests murmur approval, as though the universe just aligned for half a heartbeat. Someone in the crowd sighs, a deep, satisfied sound, like closure. You glance around and realize no one claps, no one cheers. The quiet is almost reverent. The players bow, hands pressed to their chests, and the priests approach with small offerings, bundles of flowers, copal, feathers. There's relief in their faces, but not joy. It's done. The world continues. Then, something strange. One of the priests raises a torch, illuminating a carved panel on the far wall. The image depicts a player kneeling, his head replaced by a snake sprouting maize stalks. It's both beautiful and grotesque. The symbolism is unmistakable: life from death, fertility from sacrifice. You swallow hard, feeling the weight of it. Historians still argue whether the player's death was literal or ceremonial. Was someone actually executed after the match? Was it the winner, honored through death, or the loser, punished for imbalance? No one knows. But standing here, watching the light flicker across those carvings, you sense that the answer might not matter. The act of believing was the point. The gods needed devotion, not data. A gust of wind scatters dust over the court, and the smoke thins. You can almost imagine the gods stretching, yawning, muttering among themselves, perhaps mildly impressed, perhaps checking their celestial watches. It's not that they are cruel, it's that they are eternal. What's a single match to beings who measure time in eons? You watch the last ember fade in the torchlight, and the quiet deepens. The priests gather their things, the crowd disperses, and the players limp toward the shadows. You're left alone with the echo of rubber on stone. You think back to every mundane motion, the hip strikes, the chants, the fatigue, and realize that dullness was the offering. The monotony itself was sacred. You smile, a weary kind of smile, because you understand now. The gods might not have been entertained, but they were reassured. The world still worked, humans still played their part, and the sun would rise again. Maybe divine boredom is the price of cosmic order. Maybe that's not so different from your own routines. The morning coffee, the quiet commute, the repetition that keeps your own tiny universe spinning. The last chant fades. Somewhere, a jaguar calls. And for the briefest moment, the silence feels complete. The next morning dawns with a softness that almost feels like mercy. A pale mist hangs over the court, blurring the edges of the world. The crowds are gone now, replaced by a few priests sweeping away petals and ashes, their movements slow and practiced. You sit at the edge again, the stones still cool from the night air, and watch as a single player lingers at the far end. He's tracing a finger along the carvings, those same haunting panels that show bodies dissolving into serpents, heads replaced by flowers, and balls sprouting human faces. You wonder what he's thinking. Relief? Fear? Maybe both. For centuries, scholars have stared at these same images, trying to decide what really happened when the final ball stopped rolling. Were players actually sacrificed at the end of a match, or did the Maya simply honor them symbolically? The debate never ends. The truth, much like the game itself, bounces back and forth endlessly. Some early Spanish chroniclers wrote dramatic accounts of ritual killings, bloodletting, and decapitated champions. It made for sensational reading, proof, they thought, of pagan barbarity. But the archaeology tells a more ambiguous story. Many ball courts have no evidence of sacrifice at all, while a few, like Chichen Itza, bear unmistakable traces of ritual death. So which was it? Historians still argue whether these events were rare spectacles, exaggerated myths, or just the dark side of divine pageantry. The lonely player glances toward the center of the court, where the ball lies half buried in dust. He doesn't pick it up. Instead, he kneels and presses his palms to the stone, whispering a prayer too quiet to catch. You suspect he's thanking the gods for survival. It's strange, though, the carvings suggest the winner might have been the one offered to the gods. Imagine training your whole life, perfecting every motion, just to be rewarded with death. It sounds tragic from your modern viewpoint, but in the Mayan cosmology, it wasn't punishment. It was promotion. To be chosen was to step beyond the human world, to become a seed planted in the divine soil. You think about the myth of the hero twins again, how they descended, died, and rose anew. The Maya didn't see death as an ending, but as a change of direction. Life was cyclical, like the ball's endless motion. Maybe that's why they didn't need to win the way we understand victory. Winning was endurance. And dying, in the right way, was transcendence. Still, it's easy to romanticize from a safe distance. You watch that player, alone in the mist, and can't help wondering if the idea of honor through sacrifice felt any less terrifying when the knife glinted in torchlight. You can picture the scene, the priests chanting, the crowd hushed, the player kneeling with calm resignation, or maybe trembling behind a mask of ritual stoicism. Then again, maybe it never happened at all. Some experts suggest the ballgame sacrifices depicted on walls weren't literal but allegorical, representations of the sun's daily death and rebirth, or the maize god's cyclical disappearance and return. The Maya, after all, loved metaphor. To them, art wasn't about depicting reality but weaving it into cosmic order. The player stands and stretches, his joints cracking audibly in the quiet. You can see the scars along his ribs, the faint purple bruises that trace his body like a map. He walks toward the exit, each step deliberate. For him, the game isn't over, it's simply paused until the gods call again. You trail after him, imagining how it must have felt to live under that constant, sacred obligation. Every game was a renewal, but also a reminder. The gods giveth, and the gods occasionally taketh with ceremony. A priest passes by carrying a small idol, an obsidian mask with inlaid jade eyes. The mask gleams faintly, reflecting the court's empty surface. You swear, for just a second, that the eyes blink. Maybe that's your imagination, or maybe the gods are still watching, even now, evaluating whether the ritual satisfied their cosmic boredom. You sit back down, tracing one of the carvings with your fingertips. The stone is rough, pitted from centuries of weather and ritual smoke. The carving shows a player kneeling while another stands behind him, sword raised. But there's no fear in the posture, no violence in the lines. It's strangely serene, almost tender. Maybe the Mayas saw sacrifice not as cruelty but as completion, like a final note in a perfectly played song. You can't help but chuckle softly. Imagine explaining that to a modern sports fan. Yeah, the championship winner gets decapitated, but don't worry, it's a good thing. It's the kind of cultural gap that makes anthropology equal parts fascinating and horrifying. The priest with the idol pauses nearby, studying you. His expression is neutral, but you sense the weight of centuries behind his eyes. He nods once, then gestures toward the carvings. The game, he says softly, is never about death. It is about the seed. His accent thickens the words, rolling them like stones. When the head falls, the maze grows. You nod back, pretending to understand fully, but inside, the thought lodges deep. Maybe every culture has its own way of turning fear into meaning. The Maya just happened to carve theirs in stone and call it sport. The mist begins to lift, and sunlight spills across the court. Dust motes swirl, glowing like tiny stars. You realize how eerily quiet it is without the crowd, without the thump of rubber, without the chants. The space feels heavy with memory, like it's waiting for the next generation to arrive and start the cycle again. You glance at the ring high above the court, the impossible goal that almost no one ever reached. Its shadow cuts a perfect line across the stone, right where the player had been kneeling. You can almost hear the ball's phantom bounce, echoing through time. And suddenly you understand the dull truth at the heart of it all. The ball game wasn't designed for excitement. It was a slow rehearsal of existence itself, a ritual that blurred the line between game, prayer, and prophecy. The players weren't athletes. They were actors in a drama the gods never stopped watching. Maybe that's why the carvings look so calm. When you know the universe needs you to keep bouncing the ball, fear becomes irrelevant. Boredom becomes purpose. Even sacrifice becomes part of the rhythm. The last of the mist burns away, revealing the bright blue of the sky. A new group of apprentices steps hesitantly onto the court, their movements stiff, their eyes full of both awe and dread. The cycle continues. Somewhere beyond the tree line, drums begin to beat. You stand, stretching your back, and glance once more at the carvings. The stone seems to shimmer faintly, as if alive with the breath of history. You exhale and smile. The Maya might not have invented fun, but they perfected meaning. By the time the next sun rises, you've begun to sense it. The undercurrent of strategy beneath every bounce, every pause, every gaze exchanged across the court. What looked like an athletic ritual is slowly revealing itself as something far more political. You stand near the boundary wall, and as the players take their positions, you realize that you're not watching sport at all. You're watching diplomacy, performed in sweat and silence. The nobles have gathered again, their feathered headdresses trembling in the breeze. This time, though, the atmosphere isn't quite as festive. There's tension here, thick enough to taste. Two city-states are represented, one from the valley to the east, another from the mountains. Their rulers sit opposite each other, faces expressionless, but the air between them crackles like static. The ball is tossed, and the game begins. But the match is only half about who wins. The rest of it is theater, an elaborate negotiation carried out through motion, a conversation of body language and symbolism. You can almost read it. The careful restraint, the exaggerated deflection, the deliberate show of power that says, "We could crush you if we wanted, but we'd rather be allies." Historians still argue whether these matches truly decided political outcomes or merely reflected them. Some scholars believe ball games were held to resolve disputes, ritualized conflict without the bloodshed of war. Others insist they were pageants staged to display dominance, more intimidation than diplomacy. Either way, the stakes were real, and losing could mean far more than bruised pride. You watch one player deliver a powerful hip shot that sends the ball soaring into the opposing side's court. The nobles murmur approvingly. A servant behind them quietly unrolls a codex, noting each key play as if tallying proof of cosmic favor. You almost laugh. It's sports commentary, 8th century style. But it's also politics. Every good strike adds weight to one city's prestige. Every fumble might whisper weakness. You can almost feel the tension ripple through the crowd like heat haze. These aren't just spectators, they are ambassadors, merchants, priests, spies. Each bounce of the ball carries a subtext. Our gods are stronger. Our maze grows taller. Our future is secure. You glance toward the priests standing near the baseline. They are whispering to each other, perhaps reading omens from the play. A missed shot could mean the gods disapprove of a treaty. A sudden gust of wind might signify divine commentary. Even the ball's spin might be interpreted as cosmic handwriting. It's strangely modern in its manipulation. You can imagine today's politicians doing the same, spinning a missed goal into a symbolic victory during a press conference. Some things never change, only the uniforms do. As the match continues, the rhythm becomes hypnotic again. The players move with precision, their bodies like metronomes set to an ancient political beat. You notice something else. Each team wears slightly different headdresses, one decorated with jade beads, the other with obsidian. Both materials are symbols of power, but they tell different stories. Jade is stability, fertility, divine continuity. Obsidian is war, death, transformation. The visual contrast is deliberate, a dialogue played out in color and shimmer. When one player stumbles, the nobles from his side shift uncomfortably. Across the court, the opposing ruler doesn't smile, but you can sense satisfaction radiating like sunlight. In this game, a single slip is a diplomatic message, a small fracture in cosmic order. A scribe scratches furiously at a bark paper sheet, his quill made from a parrot feather. You peek over his shoulder and glimpse a line of glyphs, names, numbers, perhaps even odds. Maybe it's the world's oldest sports betting slip. You chuckle quietly, earning a glare from the scribe. He clearly doesn't find the moment funny. And then the ball ricochets off a player's hip, bounces against the wall, and flies straight through one of the stone rings. The court gasps. You've been here long enough to know how rare that is. The crowd erupts, not in cheers, exactly, but in awe. Even the priests look startled. The player who made the shot drops to his knees, overwhelmed, as his teammates swarm around him. The opposing ruler slowly rises. His expression doesn't change, but his fingers tighten on the armrest of his throne. You realize that this single moment could alter alliances. The ball has just declared divine favor, and the gods, it seems, have chosen a side. Historians believe that such matches were often timed with political negotiations, marriage proposals between royal families, or the conclusion of trade agreements. Victory could mean validation from the heavens, a divine green light to expand territory or demand tribute. And defeat? Well, defeat was a celestial memo telling you to sit down and behave. The rulers exchange glances, polite, measured, and utterly lethal. The crowd quiets again. A priest raises his hands and chants a blessing, sealing the outcome in the name of the gods. Somewhere deep inside the palace, drums start to beat, slow and ceremonial. The match is over, but the consequences are only beginning. You follow the crowd as it disperses. Conversations hum like insects around you. Talk of omens, trade, and gossip. You overhear one merchant joke that the ball must be tired from carrying so much political weight. You grin. At least humor survived the centuries. In the plaza outside, dancers already prepare to reenact the game for the evening festival, a lighter, more public version for the common people. Their laughter contrasts sharply with the tension you just witnessed. Here, it's entertainment again, stripped of divine and political meaning. The duality fascinates you. The same game can be both deadly serious and delightfully trivial, depending on who's watching. You pause near a vendor selling carved miniatures of ball players. He offers one to you with a grin. For luck, he says. You take it, running your fingers along the tiny polished surface. It's smooth, cool, and slightly sticky from humidity. He winks. Maybe your city wins next time. You laugh softly and slip the figure into your pouch. It feels symbolic somehow, carrying a small piece of politics disguised as a toy. As night falls, torches flicker to life along the palace walls. You can see the two rulers again, this time seated side by side at a feast table, cups of cacao in their hands. The ball game has done its work. The gods have spoken, and peace, or at least temporary cooperation, has been achieved. You tilt your head and smile. It's diplomacy through choreography, divine arbitration by proxy. It's absurdly elegant, and just a little bit dull. No screaming fans, no highlight reels, just measured grace and the soft rustle of politics in motion. And as you watch, it occurs to you that the real brilliance of the Mayan ballgame wasn't in the athleticism or the pageantry, it was in its subtlety. The ball court was a boardroom, the players its negotiators, and the gods its ever-skeptical investors. You lean back, sip the last of your cocoa, and let the thought linger. Maybe every civilization eventually finds a way to turn its politics into performance. The Maya just did it better dressed. By now, you've wandered far beyond the first court, past its weathered walls and chanting priests, and deeper into the jungled heart of the Maya world. The humidity wraps around you like a warm, damp blanket as you move through the ruins of what used to be bustling cities. Everywhere you turn, the earth bulges with stone, remnants of plazas, pyramids, and of course, yet another ball court. At first, it feels repetitive. But the more you look, the stranger it becomes. Every city you visit, from Kopan in the south to Chichen Itza in the north, has its own version of the same strange structure, long and narrow, flanked by high sloping walls, and eerily silent. You lose count after a while. There are hundreds, no, thousands, of them scattered across the old Maya lands. Archaeologists have found over 1,300 so far, and every year new ones emerge from beneath the vines, like ancient ghosts stretching their limbs. You pause in front of one of the smaller courts in the city of Yaxchilan. It's half swallowed by the jungle, the walls cracked and moss-covered, the stone rings broken and lying at odd angles. A toucan lands on one of them, cocking its head as if daring you to serve. You can't help but smile. It's hard to imagine that this quiet ruin once echoed with crowds, drums, and the heavy thump of rubber. A local guide, barefoot and smiling, joins you and gestures at the overgrown walls. Every city had one, he says. Some had 10. Even the small villages built them. The game wasn't a hobby, It was a duty. His tone is matter-of-fact, but the idea sinks into you like humidity into cloth. You start to understand, this wasn't just sport, it was infrastructure. Every court was a spiritual and civic anchor, a piece of cosmic architecture linking heaven, earth, and the underworld. The Maya believed the world itself was divided into levels, layers connected by sacred centers. The ball court was one of those centers, a portal where the human and divine worlds touched, however briefly, through the rhythm of play. As you walk along the cracked surface, your footsteps echo faintly. The guide points out carvings still visible despite the erosion, players in mid-motion, serpents curling from their hips, the same imagery repeated again and again across the empire. They all told the same story, he says. Different cities, same gods. You imagine the ancient travelers moving from one kingdom to another, carrying their rubber balls, their costumes, their rules. Maybe each court had its own quirks, a slightly different slope here, a ritual variation there, but the essence was identical. It was a shared language across the Maya world, uniting people who spoke dozens of dialects. The ball court was the one place where everyone knew the rhythm, even if they didn't share words. Historians still argue whether this standardization was deliberate or organic. Was it the result of a centralized cultural system or simply the natural diffusion of a powerful idea? No one agrees. But you like to think it was both. The game spreading like fire through dry grass, fueled by faith, rivalry, and just a touch of vanity. You travel north to Tikal, one of the great Maya cities, and the scale takes your breath away. Here, the ball court isn't tucked away or hidden. It's right in the ceremonial core, surrounded by towering temples that pierce the sky. The wind whips between them, carrying faint whispers that sound almost like cheering. You can see how everything was designed for spectacle. From the highest temple steps, a ruler could look down and see his people, his players, his gods, all in perfect alignment. You picture it alive again, banners snapping in the breeze, incense curling from clay burners, nobles reclining on stone benches. The players below move in a blur, the rubber ball streaking like a dark comet. The court itself glows under the sun, every stone radiating light. The whole city breathes with it, as if the match itself keeps time for everyone, the heartbeat of empire. You catch yourself thinking, this must have been exhausting. Every game wasn't just for fun, it was a civic ceremony, a sacred duty, and a political performance rolled into one. Imagine living in a world where even the local pickup game might represent cosmic balance. You'd never skip practice again. In the late afternoon, you reach Chichen Itza, the site of the largest known ball court in the Maya world. It's colossal, nearly 550 feet long and 230 feet wide. When you step onto the court, the sound changes instantly. Your voice bounces back with eerie clarity, amplifying every breath. The acoustics are so perfect that you can whisper at one end and be heard clearly at the other. Historians still debate whether that was intentional design or a miraculous accident. Either way, it feels impossible. You tilt your head up toward the massive stone rings, set impossibly high on the walls. They look more like cosmic portals than goals. You remember that the ball weighed nearly 9 pounds, dense rubber that could bruise bone, and marvel that anyone could send it through a ring that high without breaking a hip in the process. Some modern reenactors have tried, of course. The result? Mostly awkward shuffling and a few pulled muscles. The Maya made it look effortless. As the sun dips lower, the carvings on the walls come alive in the golden light, rows of decapitated players with snakes spilling from their necks, flowers blooming from wounds, skulls morphing into maize. You know by now that these aren't horror scenes, they're theology in motion. Life sprouting from death, creation emerging from sacrifice. You trace the patterns and feel their rhythm, as though the stone itself hums with ancient certainty. A faint breeze brushes against your face, and with it, a whisper of realization. The ball game wasn't entertainment. It was identity. Every court was a heartbeat in the body of the Maya civilization, keeping the cosmic order steady even as dynasties rose and fell. You pause and take one last look around. The court stretches before you, empty yet alive, a stone memory that refuses to fade. The jungle hums softly in the background, cicadas, frogs, the low croak of a distant bird. You can almost hear the old chant again, the sound of rubber striking stone. For a moment, you think of all those other courts still hidden beneath centuries of growth. Somewhere, vines are curling over another buried wall. Another city lies waiting to be uncovered, another silent arena yearning for breath. The game, it seems, still isn't over. You smile, sweat glistening on your forehead. You've walked through centuries of ritual and rivalry, and somehow, you're starting to understand the beauty of the boredom. The ball game was never about spectacle. It was about consistency, repetition, rhythm. The Maya didn't need it to thrill them. They needed it to remind them that the world still spun in time with the gods. You glance once more at the stone ring high above and murmur, "Your move, universe." The path leading away from Chichen Itza feels strangely quiet. You follow it deeper into the forest, where the air grows heavy and the ruins begin to fade beneath centuries of vines. The hum of insects replaces the echoes of crowds. The Maya cities have fallen silent, their courts overrun by green. The ball game, once the heartbeat of an empire, now lies buried beneath leaves and loam. You pause beneath a saber tree, its roots coiled like veins, its trunk stretching impossibly tall, and feel the weight of absence. For the first time, the world that once lived for the rhythm of rubber and ritual is gone. No priests. No players. No thrum of drums in the distance. Just you, the jungle, and the faint whisper of what used to be. The Maya collapse wasn't a single cataclysm. It was a slow unraveling, a century-long fade between the 8th and 10th centuries when cities were abandoned, dynasties dissolved, and ball courts went still. Historians still argue whether it was drought, rebellion, trade breakdown, or sheer ecological exhaustion that did it. Most likely, it was all of the above. You can imagine it happening gradually. One city stops hosting the great ritual games. A few seasons later, another court falls silent. The players grow old, their sons choose other paths, the rubber trees overgrow the practice grounds. The gods, once constant spectators, are left with nothing to watch. And yet, the game doesn't die. It mutates. When you reach a clearing, you find something unexpected, a smaller court, half collapsed but still recognizable. The stones are newer, arranged in a simpler pattern. It's not classic Maya, it's something in between. A transitional style, probably built after the great cities fell. You crouch to touch the carvings, and the style feels different, rougher, rushed, less ornate but just as deliberate. The people who built this weren't kings or priests. They were survivors. The ball game had become smaller, more local, but it still mattered. In villages far from the lost capitals, the rubber still bounced, the rituals still whispered of cosmic cycles. The grandeur was gone, but the faith remained. That's the paradox of the Maya ball game. Even when civilization collapsed, the idea of play as prayer refused to die. You picture a group of villagers carving out a flat patch of date, rolling a handmade ball between their hips and forearms, performing a humble echo of the sacred drama their ancestors once staged for kings. There's something profoundly human about that, how even in decline, people cling to ritual, to rhythm, to the familiar heartbeat of tradition. You keep walking north. The ruins thin out, the language changes, and eventually you reach what used to be Totonac territory. Here, centuries after the classic Maya faded, the ball game survives under new names: Tlachtli, ulama, echoes of the original pits. The courts are different, the rules slightly altered, but the soul of the game is unmistakable. By the time the Aztecs rise to power, the ball game has become part of their own cosmic framework. They adopt it, amplify it, and like good showmen, make it bloodier and louder. They play it before massive audiences, turning what was once meditative ritual into political theater again. It's funny, you think. The Maya designed the game to sustain the cosmos, and centuries later, the Aztecs use it to display dominance. Same ball, different agenda. Human nature has always been good at repurposing faith into entertainment. Then come the Spaniards. You imagine the first conquistadors stumbling into a dusty courtyard in the 1500s, watching locals bounce a rubber ball without touching it by hand. They'd never seen anything like it. Europe had rubberless sports, soccer, tennis. But this was alien. One chronicler, shocked by the energy of it, described the ball as alive, leaping as though possessed by a spirit. But fascination soon turned to fear. The Spanish, unable to separate ritual from religion, outlawed the game in many regions, calling it pagan idolatry. The courts fell into ruin again, some buried intentionally, others simply left to rot. The game retreated into whispers and back alleys, surviving only in remote villages where the church's reach was weakest. Even so, it never disappeared completely. Somewhere, in dusty valleys and jungle clearings, small groups continued to play, no longer for kings or gods, but for each other. The dull, steady rhythm endured through the centuries, like a heartbeat the world forgot to silence. You reach a hilltop and look back toward the jungle. You can almost see the layers of time stacked like sediment, the glorious courts of the classic Maya, the modest village games, the outlawed matches played under starlight. The game has changed, but it's still here, waiting. Below you, in a small modern town, children are playing soccer on a cracked concrete field. Their laughter carries faintly on the wind. You can't help but grin. The goalposts are different, the ball lighter, but the same spirit thrums beneath it. The rhythm of motion, competition, and belief. Humans never really stop playing, they just change the rules. You walk down toward the sound. The kids' game pauses when they see you, their bright eyes curious. One of them picks up the ball and spins it on his fingertip before letting it drop. It bounces once, twice, then settles in the dust. That simple bounce feels like an echo, an unbroken thread stretching back more than 1,000 years. You smile and mutter, you have no idea you're keeping the cosmos alive. One of the older boys laughs, misunderstanding but somehow agreeing. We always play, he says. Even when the power goes out. You nod, and it feels like a prophecy. You linger until sunset. The forest murmurs behind you, alive with insects and ghosts. Somewhere out there, under layers of moss and silence, another ball court waits to be uncovered, a perfect rectangle of purpose, patiently reminding the earth that it once mattered. The dull truth is that the game never needed crowds, kings, or even rules to survive. It lived because people kept moving, kept bouncing, kept believing that motion could mean something. And as you turn to leave, fireflies blink among the ruins like tiny torches, as if applauding the persistence of play itself. You step out of the humid jungle and into the blinding brightness of a new world. Centuries have passed, but you barely notice the transition. One blink, and the sacred courts have become laboratories, factories, and trade routes. The rubber ball that once carried the weight of gods now fuels empires of industry. The sound of priests chanting has been replaced by the hiss of steam and the clatter of machines. The story of the ball itself didn't end when the Maya cities fell. No, it bounced onward, sometimes literally, into the hands of explorers, scientists, and entrepreneurs who had no idea they were playing with divine leftovers. It begins with curiosity. When Europeans first arrived in the Americas, they were fascinated by rubber, this strange, bouncy substance they'd never seen before. One 16th century Spaniard described a dark resin that leaps as though alive, the same way he once described the Mayan game. They didn't understand it, but they saw potential. They began shipping chunks of it across the ocean, hoping to find a use beyond novelty toys and curiosities. You picture a London gentleman in a powdered wig poking a lump of rubber with his cane, frowning as it sticks to everything but refuses to hold shape. He has no idea that it was once sacred, that the same material once symbolized the beating heart of the cosmos. To him, it's just weird tropical goo. But centuries roll forward, and curiosity turns to obsession. Scientists in Europe begin experimenting with this sticky miracle. By the 18th century, they're using it to waterproof coats, erase pencil marks, and even make primitive balls. There's irony here, of course, the descendants of conquistadors reinventing what their ancestors destroyed. You almost want to laugh, but it's the kind of laugh that catches in your throat. The real transformation comes in the 19th century. You follow the thread to the humid depths of the Amazon, where rubber trees bleed milky sap into buckets, and men wade through mud with machetes and greed. The industrial world has found its new god, not Kukulkan or Itzamna, but commerce. The Maya saw the ball as cosmic balance. Victorians see it as profit margin. You watch factory workers in smoky English cities pressing, rolling, and shaping the stuff into tires, hoses, and shoe soles. Somewhere in all that noise, a small factory is making balls again, rounder, lighter, tamer. They'll never guess they're echoing a 3,000-year-old rhythm. Historians still argue whether the industrial obsession with rubber directly traces back to those early Spanish encounters with the Maya and Aztecs. Some say the inspiration was immediate, others insist it was a coincidence, a rediscovery rather than inheritance. But when you hold a modern rubber ball, it's hard not to feel the ghost of its ancestor pulsing beneath your fingers. You picture the hero twins again, those mythic tricksters playing ball to outwit death itself. What would they think of this new world, where their sacred tool is mass-produced in factories and sold for a few dollars a dozen? Maybe they'd shrug. Maybe they'd laugh. After all, the cycle continues. A museum curator leads you through a glass-walled exhibit one rainy afternoon. Inside, a cracked ball from the classic Maya era sits under dim light, beside a modern basketball. The plaque reads, 2,000 years apart, same material, same motion. You can't help but press your face close to the glass. The old ball looks fragile, its surface mottled, the color of dark honey. But it still seems alive somehow, like it's waiting for a player's hip to send it flying again. Want to hear something weird? The curator whispers. The ancient one still bounces. Not much, but enough. You grin. Of course it does. The gods might be gone, but the rubber still remembers. Later, in a dusty library, you find old documents describing how European scientists struggled to tame the material. Rubber melted in heat, cracked in cold, stuck to everything. It wasn't until Charles Goodyear accidentally dropped a mixture of rubber and sulfur on a hot stove that the solution appeared: vulcanization. The discovery that turned rubber from temperamental goo into a modern miracle. You chuckle quietly. Goodyear believed he was divinely inspired, that God had guided him to the process. If only he knew the divine connection went much further back, that the Maya had already woven divinity into the very substance centuries before he was born. As the industrial age booms, rubber becomes one of the world's most valuable commodities. Millions of lives are built, or broken, around it. Colonial companies carve scars into rainforests, enslaving workers to harvest the trees. The echo of ritual sacrifice takes a darker, more literal turn. Humanity has always been good at turning belief into industry. and now the cost is measured in labor rather than blood. You walk through the remains of a rubber plantation in the Amazon. The air smells faintly of decay and sap. Broken buckets lie half buried in mud. The silence feels familiar, eerily like those abandoned Maya courts. You realize the rhythm hasn't stopped, it's just changed hands. The old gods may have faded, but humanity's devotion to the bounce, to progress, to motion, remains as strong as ever. You crouch and pick up a fragment of hardened latex from the ground. It's light, brittle, useless now, but you turn it over in your fingers and imagine the journey it represents. From sacred ritual to playground toy, from cosmic symbolism to corporate logo. You toss it lightly. It bounces once, awkwardly, and settles into the mud. The sky darkens, and the sound of distant thunder rolls overhead. You smile. Maybe the gods are still watching, amused by how humans keep reinventing their old games in the name of industry and fun. By the time you reach the edge of the plantation, modern life begins to intrude: cars, neon lights, and the synthetic smell of tires. Rubber has conquered the world in ways the Maya could never have imagined. The ball that once symbolized the sun's movement now spins under your car tires, holding up highways instead of heavens. And somewhere in a toy store, a child bounces a ball against the floor, giggling, completely unaware that they are reenacting a 1,000-year-old prayer. You stand at the glass window of a downtown shop, watching rows of colorful rubber balls stacked in plastic bins. You tap the glass lightly and whisper, "You've come a long way, haven't you?" It's dull, in a beautiful way, a quiet endurance. The Mayan ballgame didn't survive as a religion, but as an instinct. Humanity still needs to move, to play, to give meaning to the endless bounce. Maybe that's the real continuity. You find yourself in front of a gleaming replica of a Mayan ball court, its limestone now replaced by polished concrete, its hieroglyphs translated into QR codes for tourists with short attention spans. A sign reads, "Authentic reenactment of the ancient Mayan ball game," with an exclamation mark so desperate it feels like a confession. You can't help smiling. After all, this is what the sacred has become, a ticketed event with folding chairs, bottled water, and a souvenir stand selling rubber keychains shaped like skulls. You sit down near the back of the crowd, where the sound from the portable speaker system comes in waves, loud, tinny, and just a little off-sync. The players walk out, wearing imitation leather belts and padded knee guards. Their costumes are close, but not quite. The modern materials gleam too brightly. The stone court looks suspiciously like fiberglass. Still, they look nervous, which somehow feels authentic. You hear the MC's voice booming through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ancient sport of the gods, the Mayan ball game." Applause crackles. The crowd is ready to be transported. You lean back and let it wash over you. When the whistle blows, the players start, awkwardly. The rubber ball thuds against the ground and veers sideways, catching one of them squarely in the ribs. He grimaces, but the tourists cheer anyway, smartphones raised like ritual offerings. You stifle a laugh. The modern version of this ancient cosmic drama looks less like religion and more like a gym class gone wrong. You can almost hear the ghosts of Mayan priests sighing in the background, muttering, "At least we had style." Still, the performance has its own charm. Between the forced enthusiasm and clumsy movements, there's a strange sincerity. The players, local guides, history students, maybe even descendants of the people who once built these courts, are doing their best to keep something alive. Historians still argue whether recreating ancient rituals like this preserves history or distorts it. Is it reverence, or is it theater? You decide it's both. A little cringe, a little sacred. Humanity's default balance. As the match drags on, the ball finally bounces cleanly off a player's hip and sails toward a stone ring high on the wall. It misses by a wide margin, thudding into the dirt. The crowd gasps dramatically, as though witnessing divine tragedy. You clap anyway, it's the effort that counts. A small boy beside you whispers to his father, "Did they really die if they lost?" The father hesitates. "Sometimes," he says. Then he adds, "Or maybe they didn't. Depends which tour guide you ask." You smile. That might be the most accurate summary of Mayan history anyone's ever given. When the game ends, the players bow, sweat glistening under the hot floodlights. The MC shouts into the mic, "Let's hear it for the warriors of the sun." Everyone applauds. A few people film the closing dance, complete with pre-recorded drums that sound suspiciously like stock audio. You linger as the crowd disperses, watching workers wheel away props and sweep the sand. The silence returns. Without the speakers and costumes, the space feels oddly peaceful again, almost sacred, in a way the performance couldn't capture. You step onto the court when no one's looking. The concrete is warm beneath your feet. You close your eyes, trying to imagine what it would have felt like centuries ago. The smell of incense, the weight of belief, the pulse of drums echoing through jungle fog. It's not easy. The world has changed too much. But still, for a moment, you feel it, the faint vibration of something old that refuses to die. You open your eyes to see a guide approaching, smiling politely. "We close soon," she says, her accent gentle. "Just one question," you ask. "What do you think they really played for?" She shrugs. "For balance, maybe. For rain. For stories." Then, with a small grin, "Or maybe just because people like to hit things with their hips." You laugh softly, and she does too. There's truth in her answer, more than any textbook could offer. Outside the gates, the souvenir stalls glow under fluorescent light. Vendors sell rubber balls, t-shirts, carved replicas of the stone rings. You pick up one of the balls, a perfect modern sphere, smooth and springy. When you bounce it against the pavement, it leaps high, almost too high. You catch it and whisper, "Still got it." The vendor chuckles. "Strong bounce," he says. "Made in China." You grin. Somehow that feels like the final punchline of history itself. As you walk back toward your hotel, you pass a mural of the hero twins painted on a wall. They are rendered in bright spray paint, stylized and modern, one wearing sunglasses. The caption reads, "Play for the sun." Maybe that's what's left of the myth, a wink, a gesture, a meme. But isn't that enough? Stories evolve to survive. You think of the ball bouncing through time, through courts and factories, through jungle temples and suburban gyms. It's the same motion, just wearing a different costume. By the time you reach your room, the day has cooled. You sink into bed and scroll through your phone, where an algorithm suggests a short video titled Mayan Ballgame, Real Life or Myth. You almost click it, but stop. You've had enough experts for one lifetime. You set the phone aside and let your mind drift. The sound of distant traffic blends with the memory of rubber on stone. You picture the old courts again, now empty, overgrown, quiet. The irony settles softly. After all the blood, the myth, the noise, the real endurance wasn't in the gods or the game, but in the bounce itself. You roll the souvenir ball across your palm one last time before sleep. It's smooth, perfect, anonymous. It doesn't care who plays, or why. It only knows one thing, to keep moving. And that, you think, is about as divine as anything gets. You return to the jungle one last time. The humid air presses against your skin, thick with the scent of soil and moss. The trees have reclaimed everything, temples, altars, even the mighty ball courts that once thundered with ritual. The limestone steps crumble under your feet as you walk into the quiet, and there, in the clearing, the court waits. It looks smaller than you remember. Vines curl through the rings, roots split the walls. A parrot screeches somewhere high above, then silence again. You can almost hear the ghosts exhale. You stand at the center, tracing the faint line where players once moved in rhythm. The stones feel warm, alive. If you listen long enough, you swear you can hear the whisper of the rubber ball glancing off hips and forearms, the crowd murmuring prayers that never reach the gods. This is where the truth finally settles in. The Mayan ballgame, the sacred contest of life, death, and cosmic order, wasn't thrilling in the way we imagine. It wasn't a roaring spectacle of drama and blood. It was, more often than not, long, repetitive, confusing, and strangely quiet. A ritual of motion, not emotion. A ceremony of endurance disguised as play. Historians still argue whether most games were for the gods or the governors, whether sacrifice was real or symbolic, whether winning was honor or doom. The truth is slippery, like the rubber ball itself, impossible to hold without it bouncing out of reach. But the dullness of it, that monotonous repetition, is what made it sacred. The game wasn't meant to entertain, it was meant to sustain. You take a few slow steps, mimicking the movements you've imagined 100 times. The ball in your hand, your cheap souvenir, feels heavier now. You drop it gently. It hits the stone and rises halfway back. That sound, that bounce, carries through the clearing like a heartbeat. Maybe that was the point all along. To hear something respond when the world felt silent. You think of all those players who trained for years only to spend hours keeping a ball in motion without using their hands. It must have been exhausting. And dull. But in that dullness, there was devotion. The slow, hypnotic rhythm of something larger than any single person. You can see how it might become prayer. You brush your hand across the carved wall. The glyphs are faint, almost erased by time, but one still stands out, a stylized circle with rays radiating outward. Some say it represents the ball, others claim it's the sun. Maybe, you think, they're the same thing. A warm breeze stirs the leaves, and sunlight flickers across the court. For a moment, it looks alive again. You imagine a player standing where you are, his breath steady, his focus unbroken, his mind somewhere between heaven and the underworld. The crowd's murmur fades, and it's just him, the ball, and gravity. You realize that's what survives, not the noise, not the myths, but the focus. The simple act of giving your attention to something beyond yourself. You smile faintly. The Mayans built their lives around cycles. The sun, the moon, the crops, the seasons. Everything was about movement and return. Maybe the game wasn't meant to thrill. Maybe it was designed to remind everyone that even dullness has purpose. You bounce the ball again. The sound is soft but clear, echoing against stone. It feels like an answer. As you sit on the court's edge, the modern world drifts back into your thoughts. The rubber factories, the museum displays, the staged performances with microphones and Wi-Fi. Everything changes, yet everything circles back. The same material, the same motion, just with different gods. And now you see it. The surprisingly dull truth about the Mayan ballgame is that it wasn't about victory or sacrifice. It was about persistence, the steady repetition that keeps the universe turning. It was a ritual reminder that life, too, is mostly repetition. Inhale, exhale, sunrise, sunset, heartbeat, bounce. You lean back against the stone, eyes half closed. The jungle hums around you. Somewhere, water drips. A cicada starts up its slow buzz, then another joins. You could almost fall asleep here. The air softens, the light fades. You feel your body slow with the rhythm of the forest, each breath a little heavier, a little calmer. The ball lies still beside you, catching the last traces of gold from the sinking sun. Everything that once felt mysterious or brutal or sacred has settled into something gentler now, something deeply human. The noise has gone, but the pattern remains, quiet and patient. You realize how much of life is like that, small, repetitive motions that, together, build meaning. You let the final image drift across your mind, the court, the players, the echo of the ball. Each bounce stretches into the next, like ripples across time. You imagine it continuing long after you've gone, somewhere in the background of existence, a heartbeat you don't have to control. And as the jungle darkens, you hear only that faint rhythm, the pulse of a world that never really stopped playing. You close your eyes. The court fades to darkness. The air cools. The sound of the ball, soft, even, eternal, lingers just long enough to guide you towards sleep. Maybe the gods are gone, maybe the players too. But the motion remains. Steady. Circular. Infinite. So, let go. Let the silence deepen. Let the last bounce fade into your dreams. Good night.